This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, and to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Chapter 50, Section 1. Men come forth and live. They enter again and die. Chapter 50, Section 2. Of every 10, 3 are ministers of life to themselves, and 3 are ministers of death. Chapter 50, Section 3. There are also 3 in every 10 whose aim is to live, but whose movements tend to the land or place of death. And for what reason? Because of their excessive endeavors to perpetuate life. Chapter 50, Section 4. But I have heard that he who is skillful in managing the life entrusted to him for a time travels on the land without having to shun rhinoceros or tiger, and enters a host without having to avoid buff coat or sharp weapon. The rhinoceros finds no place in him into which to thrust its horn, nor the tiger a place in which to fix its claws, nor the weapon a place to admit its point. And for what reason? Because there is in him no place of death. Chapter 51, Section 1. All things are produced by the Tao, and nourished by its outflowing operation. They receive their forms according to the nature of each, and are completed according to the circumstances of their condition. Therefore, all things without exception honor the Tao, and exalt its outflowing operation. Chapter 51, Section 2. This honoring of the Tao and exalting of its operation is not the result of any ordination, but always a spontaneous tribute. Chapter 51, Section 3. Thus it is that the Tao produces all things, nourishes them, brings them to their full growth, nurses them, completes them, matures them, maintains them, and overspreads them. Chapter 51, Section 4. It produces them and makes no claim to the possession of them. It carries them through their processes and does not vaunt its ability in doing so. It brings them to maturity and exercises no control over them. This is called its mysterious operation. Chapter 52, Section 1. The Tao which originated all under the sky is to be considered as the mother of them all. Chapter 52, Section 2. When the mother is found, we know what her children should be. When one knows that he is his mother's child, and proceeds to guard the qualities of the mother that belong to him, to the end of his life he will be free from all peril. Chapter 52, Section 3. Let him keep his mouth closed, and shut up the portals of his nostrils, and all his life he will be exempt from laborious exertion. Let him keep his mouth open, and spend his breath in the promotion of his affairs, and all his life there will be no safety for him. Chapter 52, Section 4. The perception of what is small is the secret of clear-sightedness. The guarding of what is soft and tender is the secret of strength. Chapter 52, Section 5. Who uses well his light, reverting to its source so bright, will from his body ward all blight, and hides the unchanging from men's sight. Chapter 53, Section 1. If I were suddenly to become known and put into a position to conduct a government according to the great Tao, what I should be most afraid of would be a boastful display. Chapter 53, Section 2. The great Tao, or way, is very level and easy, but people love the byways. Chapter 53, Section 3. Their courtyards and buildings shall be well kept, but their fields shall be ill cultivated, and their granaries very empty. They shall wear elegant and ornamented robes, carry a sharp sword at their girdle, pamper themselves in eating and drinking, and have a superabundance of property and wealth. Such princes may be called robbers and boasters. This is contrary to the Tao, surely. Chapter 54, Section 1. What Tao's skillful planter plants can never be uptorn. What his skillful arms enfold, from him can ne'er be born. Sons shall bring in lengthening line sacrifices to his shrine. Chapter 54, Section 2. Tao, when nursed within one's self, his vigor will make true, and where the family it rules, what riches will accrue! The neighborhood where it prevails in thriving will abound, and when 'tis seen throughout the state, good fortune will be found. Employ it the kingdom o'er, and men thrive all around. Chapter 54, Section 3. In this way the effect will be seen in the person, by the observation of different cases, in the family, in the neighborhood, in the state, and in the kingdom. Chapter 54, Section 4. How do I know that this effect is sure to hold thus all under the sky? By this method of observation. Chapters 55 through 63. Chapter 55, Section 1. He who has in himself abundantly the attributes of the Tao is like an infant. Poisonous insects will not sting him. Fierce beasts will not seize him. Birds of prey will not strike him. Chapter 55, Section 2. The infant's bones are weak and its sinews soft, but yet its grasp is firm. It knows not yet the union of male and female, and yet its virile member may be excited, showing the perfection of its physical essence. All day long it will cry without its throat becoming hoarse, showing the harmony in its constitution. Chapter 55, Section 3. To him by whom this harmony is known, the secret of the unchanging Tao is shown, and in the knowledge wisdom finds its throne. All life-increasing arts to evil turn, where the mind makes the vital breath to burn. False is the strength, and o'er it we should mourn. Chapter 55, Section 4. When things have become strong, they then become old, which may be said to be contrary to the Tao. Whatever is contrary to the Tao soon ends. Chapter 56, Section 1. He who knows the Tao does not care to speak about it. He who is ever ready to speak about it does not know it. Chapter 56, Section 2. He who knows it will keep his mouth shut and close the portals of his nostrils. He will blunt his sharp points and unravel the complications of things. He will attemper his brightness and bring himself into agreement with the obscurity of others. This is called the mysterious agreement. Chapter 56, Section 3. Such an one cannot be treated familiarly or distantly. He is beyond all consideration of profit or injury, of nobility or meanness. He is the noblest man under heaven. Chapter 57, Section 1. A state may be ruled by measures of correction. Weapons of war may be used with crafty dexterity. But the kingdom is made one's own only by freedom from action and purpose. Chapter 57, Section 2. How do I know that it is so? By these facts. In the kingdom, the multiplication of prohibitive enactments increases the poverty of the people. The more implements to add to their profit that the people have, the greater disorder there is in the state and clan. The more acts of crafty dexterity that men possess, the more do strange contrivances appear. The more display there is of legislation, the more thieves and robbers there are. Chapter 57, Section 3. Therefore a sage has said, I will do nothing of purpose, and the people will be transformed of themselves. I will be fond of keeping still, and the people will of themselves become correct. I will take no trouble about it, and the people will of themselves become rich. I will manifest no ambition, and the people will of themselves attain to the primitive simplicity. Chapter 58, Section 1. The government that seems the most unwise, oft goodness to the people best supplies. That which is meddling, touching everything, will work but ill, and disappointment bring. Misery, happiness is to be found by its side. Happiness, misery lurks beneath it. Who knows what either will come to in the end? Chapter 58, Section 2. Shall we then dispense with correction? The method of correction shall by a turn become distortion, and the good in it shall by a turn become evil. The delusion of the people on this point has indeed subsisted for a long time. Chapter 58, Section 3. Therefore the sage is like a square which cuts no one with its angles, like a corner which injures no one with its sharpness. He is straightforward, but allows himself no license. He is bright, but does not dazzle. Chapter 59, Section 1. For regulating the human in our constitution and rendering the proper service to the heavenly, there is nothing like moderation. Chapter 59, Section 2. It is only by this moderation that there is effected an early return to man's normal state. That early return is what I call the repeated accumulation of the attributes of the Tao. With that repeated accumulation of those attributes, there comes the subjugation of every obstacle to such return. Of this subjugation we know not what shall be the limit, and when one knows not what the limit shall be, he may be the ruler of a state. Chapter 59, Section 3. He who possesses the mother of the state may continue long. His case is like that of the plant, of which we say that its roots are deep and its flower stalks firm. This is the way to secure that its enduring life shall long be seen. Chapter 60, Section 1. Governing a great state is like cooking a small fish. Chapter 60, Section 2. Let the kingdom be governed according to the Tao, and the manes of the departed will not manifest their spiritual energy. It is not that those manes have not that spiritual energy, but it will not be employed to hurt men. It is not that it could not hurt men, but neither does the ruling sage hurt them. Chapter 60, Section 3. When these two do not injuriously affect each other, their good influences converge in the virtue of the Tao. Chapter 61, Section 1. What makes a great state is its being like a low-lying, down-flowing stream. It becomes the center to which tend all the small states under heaven. Chapter 61, Section 2. To illustrate from the case of all females, the female always overcomes the male by her stillness. Stillness may be considered a sort of abasement. Chapter 61, Section 3. Thus it is that a great state, by condescending to small states, gains them for itself, and that small states, by abasing themselves to a great state, win it over to them. In the one case the abasement leads to gaining adherents; in the other case to procuring favor. Chapter 61, Section 4. The great state only wishes to unite men together and nourish them. A small state only wishes to be received by, and to serve, the other. Each gets what it desires, but the great state must learn to abase itself. Chapter 62, Section 1. Tao has of all things the most honored place. No treasures give good men so rich a grace. Bad men it guards, and doth their ill efface. Chapter 62, Section 2. Its admirable words can purchase honor. Its admirable deeds can raise their performer above others. Even men who are not good are not abandoned by it. Chapter 62, Section 3. Therefore when the sovereign occupies his place as the son of heaven, and he has appointed his 3 ducal ministers, though a prince were to send in a round of symbol of rank large enough to fill both the hands, and that as the precursor of the team of horses in the courtyard, such an offering would not be equal to a lesson of this Tao, which one might present on his knees. Chapter 62, Section 4. Why was it that the ancients prized this Tao so much? Was it not because it could be got by seeking for it, and the guilty could escape from the stain of their guilt by it? This is the reason why all under heaven consider it the most valuable thing. Chapter 63, Section 1. It is the way of the Tao to act without thinking of acting, to conduct affairs without feeling the trouble of them, to taste without discerning any flavor, to consider what is small as great, and a few as many, and to recompense injury with kindness. Chapter 63, Section 2. The master of it anticipates things that are difficult while they are easy, and does things that would become great while they are small. All difficult things in the world are sure to arise from a previous state in which they were easy, and all great things from one in which they were small. Therefore the sage, while he never does what is great, is able on that account to accomplish the greatest things. Chapter 63, Section 3. He who lightly promises is sure to keep but little faith. He who is continually thinking things easy is sure to find them difficult. Therefore the sage sees difficulty even in what seems easy, and so never has any difficulties. Chapters 64 to 72. Chapter 64, Section 1. That which is at rest is easily kept hold of. Before a thing has given indications of its presence, it is easy to take measures against it. That which is brittle is easily broken. That which is very small is easily dispersed. Action should be taken before a thing has made its appearance. Order should be secured before disorder has begun. Chapter 64, Section 2. The tree which fills the arms grew from the tiniest sprout. The tower of 9 stories rose from a small heap of earth. The journey of 1,000 li commenced with a single step. Chapter 64, Section 3. He who acts with an ulterior purpose does harm. He who takes hold of a thing in the same way loses his hold. The sage does not act so, and therefore does no harm, but he does not lay hold so, and therefore he does not lose his hold. But people in their conduct of affairs are constantly ruining them when they are on the eve of success. If they were careful at the end, as they should be at the beginning, they would not so ruin them. Chapter 64, Section 4. Therefore the sage desires what other men do not desire, and does not prize things difficult to get. He learns what other men do not learn, and turns back to what the multitude of men have passed by. Thus he helps the natural development of all things, and does not dare to act with an ulterior purpose of his own. Chapter 65, Section 1. The ancients who showed their skill in practicing the Tao did so not to enlighten the people, but rather to make them simple and ignorant. Chapter 65, Section 2. The difficulty in governing the people arises from their having much knowledge. He who tries to govern a state by his wisdom is a scourge to it, while he who does not try to do so is a blessing. Chapter 65, Section 3. He who knows these two things finds in them also his model and rule. Ability to know this model and rule constitutes what we call the mysterious excellence of a governor. Deep and far-reaching is such mysterious excellence, showing indeed its possessor as opposite to others, but leading them to a great conformity to him. Chapter 66, Section 1. That whereby the rivers and seas are able to receive the homage and tribute of all the valley streams is their skill in being lower than they. It is thus that they are the kings of them all. So it is that the sage ruler, wishing to be above men, puts himself by his words below them, and wishing to be before them, places his person behind them. Chapter 66, Section 2. In this way, though he has his place above them, men do not feel his weight, nor though he has his place before them, do they feel it an injury to them. Chapter 66, Section 3. Therefore all in the world delight to exalt him, and do not weary of him. Because he does not strive, no one finds it possible to strive with him. Chapter 67, Section 1. All the world says that while my Tao is great, it yet appears to be inferior to other systems of teaching. Now it is just its greatness that makes it seem to be inferior. If it were like any other system, for long would its smallness have been known. Chapter 67, Section 2. But I have three precious things which I prize and hold fast. The first is gentleness, the second is economy, and the third is shrinking from taking precedence of others. Chapter 67, Section 3. With that gentleness I can be bold. With that economy I can be liberal. Shrinking from taking precedence of others, I can become a vessel of the highest honor. Nowadays they give up gentleness and are all for being bold, economy and are all for being liberal, the hindmost place, and seek only to be foremost, of all which the end is death. Chapter 67, Section 4. Gentleness is sure to be victorious even in battle, and firmly to maintain its ground. Heaven will save its possessor by his very gentleness protecting him. Chapter 68. He who endows wars has skill, assumes no martial port. He who fights with most good will, to rage makes no resort. He who vanquishes yet still, keeps from his foes apart. He whose hests men most fulfill, yet humbly plies his art. Thus we say he ne'er contends, and therein is his might. Thus we say men's wills he bends, that they with him unite. Thus we say, like heaven's his ends, no sage of old more bright. Chapter 69, Section 1. A master of the art of war has said, "I do not dare to be the host to commence the war. I prefer to be the guest, to act on the defensive. I do not dare to advance an inch. I prefer to retire a foot." This is called marshalling the ranks where there are no ranks, bearing the arms to fight where there are no arms to bear, grasping the weapon where there is no weapon to grasp, advancing against the enemy where there is no enemy. Chapter 69, Section 2. There is no calamity greater than lightly engaging in war. To do that is near losing the gentleness which is so precious. Thus it is that when opposing weapons are actually crossed, he who deplores the situation conquers. Chapter 70, Section 1. My words are very easy to know and very easy to practice, but there is no one in the world who is able to know and able to practice them. Chapter 70, Section 2. There is an originating and all-comprehending principle in my words, and an authoritative law for the things which I enforce. It is because they do not know these that men do not know me. Chapter 70, Section 3. They who know me are few, and I am on that account the more to be prized. It is thus that the sage wears a poor garb of haircloth, while he carries his signet of jade in his bosom. Chapter 71, Section 1. To know and yet think we do not know is the highest attainment. Not to know and yet think we do know is a disease. Chapter 71, Section 2. It is simply by being pained at the thought of having this disease that we are preserved from it. The sage has not the disease. He knows the pain that would be inseparable from it, and therefore he does not have it. Chapter 72, Section 1. When the people do not fear what they ought to fear, that which is their great dread will come on them. Chapter 72, Section 2. Let them not thoughtlessly indulge themselves in their ordinary life. Let them not act as if weary of what that life depends on. Chapter 72, Section 3. It is by avoiding such indulgence that such weariness does not arise. Chapter 72, Section 4. Therefore the sage knows these things of himself, but does not parade his knowledge; loves, but does not appear to set a value on himself; and thus he puts the latter alternative away, and makes choice of the former. Chapters 73 through 81. Chapter 73, Section 1. He whose boldness appears in his daring to do wrong in defiance of the laws is put to death. He whose boldness appears in his not daring to do so lives on. Of these two cases the one appears to be advantageous, and the other to be injurious. But when heaven's anger smites a man, who the cause shall truly scan? On this account the sage feels a difficulty as to what to do in the former case. Chapter 73, Section 2. It is the way of heaven not to strive, and yet it skillfully overcomes; not to speak, and yet it is skillful in obtaining a reply; does not call, and yet men come to it of themselves; its demonstrations are quiet, and yet its plans are skillful and effective. The meshes of the net of heaven are large, far apart, but letting nothing escape. Chapter 74, Section 1. The people do not fear death. To what purpose is it to try to frighten them with death? If the people were always in awe of death, and I could always seize those who do wrong and put them to death, who would dare to do wrong? Chapter 74, Section 2. There is always one who presides over the infliction death. He who would inflict death in the room of him who so presides over it may be described as hewing wood instead of a great carpenter. Seldom is it that he who undertakes the hewing instead of the great carpenter does not cut his own hands. Chapter 75, Section 1. The people suffer from famine because of the multitude of taxes consumed by their superiors. It is through this that they suffer famine. Chapter 75, Section 2. The people are difficult to govern because of the excessive agency of their superiors in governing them. It is through this that they are difficult to govern. Chapter 75, Section 3. The people make light of dying because of the greatness of their labors in seeking for the means of living. It is this which makes them think light of dying. Thus it is that to leave the subject of living altogether out of view is better than to set a high value on it. Chapter 76, Section 1. Man at his birth is supple and weak; at his death firm and strong. So it is with all things. Trees and plants in their early growth are soft and brittle; at their death dry and withered. Chapter 76, Section 2. Thus it is that firmness and strength are the concomitants of death, softness and weakness the concomitants of life. Chapter 76, Section 3. Hence he who relies on the strength of his forces does not conquer, and a tree which is strong will fill the outstretched arms, and thereby invites the feller. Chapter 76, Section 4. Therefore the place of what is firm and strong is below, and that of what is soft and weak is above. Chapter 77, Section 1. May not the way or Tao of heaven be compared to the method of bending a bow? The part of the bow which was high is brought low, and what was low is raised up. So heaven diminishes where there is superabundance, and supplements where there is deficiency. Chapter 77, Section 2. It is the way of heaven to diminish superabundance and to supplement deficiency. It is not so with the way of man. He takes away from those who have not enough to add to his own superabundance. Chapter 77, Section 3. Who can take his own superabundance and therewith serve all under heaven? Only he who is in possession of the Tao. Chapter 77, Section 4. Therefore the ruling sage acts without claiming the results as his. He achieves his merit and does not rest arrogantly in it. He does not wish to display his superiority. Chapter 78, Section 1. There is nothing in the world more soft and weak than water, and yet for attacking things that are firm and strong there is nothing that can take precedence of it, for there is nothing so effectual for which it can be changed. Chapter 78, Section 2. Everyone in the world knows that the soft overcomes the hard, and the weak the strong, but no one is able to carry it out in practice. Chapter 78, Section 3. Therefore a sage has said, he who accepts his state's reproach is hailed therefore its altar's lord. To him who bears men's direful woes, they all the name of king accord. Chapter 78, Section 4. Words that are strictly true seem to be paradoxical. Chapter 79, Section 1. When a reconciliation is effected between two parties after a great animosity, there is sure to be a grudge remaining in the mind of the one who was wrong. And how can this be beneficial to the other? Chapter 79, Section 2. Therefore, to guard against this, the sage keeps the left-hand portion of the record of the engagement, and does not insist on the speedy fulfillment of it by the other party. So, he who has the attributes of the Tao regards only the conditions of the engagement, while he who has not those attributes regards only the conditions favorable to himself. Chapter 79, Section 3. In the way of heaven there is no partiality of love. It is always on the side of the good man. Chapter 80, Section 1. In a little state with a small population, I would so order it that, though there were individuals with the abilities of 10 or 100 men, there should be no employment of them. I would make the people, while looking on death as a grievous thing, yet not remove elsewhere to avoid it. Chapter 80, Section 2. Though they had boats and carriages, they should have no occasion to ride in them. Though they had buff coats and sharp weapons, they should have no occasion to don or use them. Chapter 80, Section 3. I would make the people return to the use of knotted cords instead of the written characters. Chapter 80, Section 4. They should think their coarse food sweet, their plain clothes beautiful, their poor dwellings places of rest, and their common simple ways sources of enjoyment. Chapter 80, Section 5. There should be a neighboring state within sight, and the voices of the fowls and dogs should be heard all the way from it to us. But I would make the people to old age, even to death, not have any intercourse with it. Chapter 81, Section 1. Sincere words are not fine. Fine words are not sincere. Those who are skilled in the Tao do not dispute about it. The disputations are not skilled in it. Those who know the Tao are not extensively learned. The extensively learned do not know it. Chapter 81, Section 2. The sage does not accumulate for himself. The more that he expends for others, the more does he possess of his own. The more that he gives to others, the more does he have himself. Chapter 81, Section 3. With all the sharpness of the way of heaven, it injures not. With all the doing in the way of the sage, he does not strive.